Welcome, Wargamers, to the very depths of hunger itself on the plains of Ea, because today we are talking about the Trolls. If you are not familiar with this is a particular regiment that exists within the Nords faction. This is the humans from the cold wastes up north. And one of the regiments that they have access to is a group called the Trolls. Now, if you go to the Bellum website and look up their lore entry on Trolls, it's very minimal. It's like 3 or 4 sentences that are just like, we throw them in the front because they tend to heal up. However, recently I had a wonderful chat with Konstantinos and Stavros from Bellum themselves, and I was kind of given a nudge by my good friend to say, hey, ask about the troll lore, and they dropped a bombshell on me. And so today we're going to be talking about the trolls, given their own lore video, and releasing to the public what information I was told. If you want to see that entire interview, I do have it on my YouTube channel. I'll have a link in the description down below. And if you are interested in Trolls or Nords after this, please consider using my affiliate link down below for Bellum. Using that link will save you 10% on all your purchases and goes a very long way to supporting the channel, because those guys are they're incredible. Every time you use that link, it goes directly to helping me, my wife, our cats, the channel, all of it. Thank you so much to everyone who actively uses it now. Now, for those of you who are new to Conquest, I do have a playlist that is all about Conquest lore. Specifically, there's 2 videos talking about the Nords. Surface level is that these are the frozen waste Vikings, basically, is kind of the archetype they're going for. And along with these Vikings are giants. There's frost giants, mountain giants, sea giants. They got trolls, they got ogres, as well as a whole bunch of really cool foot troops. And they operate kind of in individual warbands. So one warband might have access to a giant or something like that and a bunch of, say, infantry units. Others may have a whole bunch of trolls because it's just what appears in their natural environment. And their jobs, at least if you're the Jarl who's leading it, is to go out, find food, provide for your tribe. That's how you keep your status. And hey, if you get enough, then you can recruit more troops and, more giants and all these kind of things. But to spoil a little surprise for you, it's not really a spoiler, but you may not know that the Nords, with all their mythology of their deities in the sky, they have this whole elaborate Viking mythology. In actuality, there is another faction in the game called the Spires. They came to Ea, the planet that this all takes place on, and basically wanted to start doing all kinds of genetic experiments on the local fauna, i.e., a bunch of humans living in snow. So the entire mythological drama that the Nords have is actually an alien race manipulating them, but that's the best way that they could interpret it. The Spires wanted to create basically a cast of super soldiers to just defend them and, act as a natural, quote-unquote, speed bump so that they could get on with the business of doing their research. Why sacrifice our important troops in an army if we can just make a disposable army wherever we go? The pieces of what would be a disposable army are known as the Einherjar. These are the mythical warriors who ascended to become part deity. These are like heroes and legends of renown. So great warriors struck down in battle. They were taken up by the gods and put back together, and they were brought back to us as bigger and stronger. And now they're 12 foot tall and can lift an entire mountain, or that kind of stuff. That mythological imbuing of deity power into a mortal hero. And then everybody else was kind of just cattle for the Spire experiments. The Spires had tried to warn them, hey, listen, there's a bunch of armies coming here to destroy us. They, having long-range communications and stuff like that, could see armies approaching. But unfortunately, the Einherjar warriors were not quite ready. And so when we meet the Nords in Conquest, they are technically post-apocalyptic Vikings. And by that I mean the Ragnarok, the day of great war, the burning of their home of Yggdrasil, has already happened. And what we see now as a faction are just the consequences of those genetic experiments without context for the humans involved. I go into a lot more detail on the Nord videos. I'm trying to do a bit of a sum up. Because today, like I said, we're talking about trolls. So how do they fit into this weird, lineage or history? Well, the tidbits of information, along with some stuff that I've read elsewhere, and I'm going to kind of put it together from my interview, is essentially that underground, underneath their home of Yggdrasil, which was sort of the place where gods met man, i.e. the Spires did their experiments on humans, there's a whole bunch of little underground chambers. we would probably say that they were testing or operating rooms. Well, when the enemies came to the door and the Ragnarok was going on, the Spires were fighting, I believe that was Dweghelm. It could have been Old Dominion. Someone correct me in the comments. I can't recall off the top of my head, but an advancing army came in and destroyed everything. Well, some of those little chambers underground were accessed, maybe by people who shouldn't be there, like, say, a really large settlement of Nords. At some point during the fracas, if you will, they got sealed in there. So now we have a part of the human culture that's been tampered with a whole lot, sealed in a room. And what else is in that room but one of their godly warriors, the Einherjar? And this sounds great. Like, surely this guy would know what to do to get us all out of here. However, they are trapped. The Einherjar is unique, though. And he is unique in that they were testing healing factors on them. Basically, if we're going to take these little monkeys that we found on the planet of Ea and turn them into weapons, we don't want to be repairing them all the time. So what can we as the Spires do to manipulate their genetic code to make them heal insanely fast? Patch themselves right up, regenerate limbs, that kind of thing. It's just medical technology. Well, you have a sizable, somewhat tribe of humans locked in a room with a guy who can regenerate, and food runs out. Where does this story go? Well, they got hungry. The tribesmen began to start eating of the flesh of the Einherjar, even though it's a hero, and I'm sure at first it was done very ceremonially, reverently and stuff, but over time of being locked underground, under snow, long forgotten into ages of myth and stuff, they began to change the more that they would consume the flesh of the Einherjar, which I presume is regenerating. So my assumption is their hero that they all revere is actively cannibalizing himself to feed these other creatures. Well, I call them creatures now, but people that he was locked in with. And he's watching them become gross. Like, whatever the process of ingesting this kind of material is starts to have a weird effect. Now, again, we don't know anything about how the Spires did this technologically, but consuming the flesh of the Einherjar, at least this particular one focused on regeneration, I don't know if they all have that ability, but this particular one started to turn them into what we know as trolls. It imbued them with a few things. One, made them bigger. That just goes along kind of with the heroic empowering of the Einherjar himself. So it made him a little bit taller, a little bit more lanky, and it also gave them a light regenerative power. Not nearly as much as the Einherjar himself, but in terms of they could quickly recover from grievous wounds, things that would have at least other soldiers at least sitting out the rest of the battle. Maybe not like a mortal wound, but they can regenerate from things like that and get right back up and right back into the fight. And at some point, whether it's tectonic shifts or opening caveways or just digging, slowly these little isolated tribes of trolls began to leak out. And by that I mean it's a people group that is now reintegrating with its own society, Nords. And various tribes will bring them in. They're not super jazzed about hanging out with the trolls. It's like you always know there's something wrong with them. They're very different. They're isolated socially. Obviously, they try to keep some of the secrets a little bit down on the down low, if you will, because nobody wants to tell, I kind of took a bite of our god for the last couple hundred years. That's real awkward. But slowly the trolls began to proliferate and now can be seen in various places throughout Nord society. Now, why is this cool? Well, to be honest, I had no concept of this. Like I said, their website had very minimal stuff, and so that's why I passed over them very quickly. But when this story got dropped on me, I was just like, that's the coolest thing. And here's why. From the perspective of the Nords, you have this sect of people within their culture, the trolls, who they are not the other. For example, like giants are a different species, okay? The trolls, instead of just being a complete other, they're more like a cousin. Like, we know these people. They're part of us. They're part of our culture. We revere the same deities, albeit in very different ways. Theirs looks different than the maybe religious style of worship rather than consumption. But there's an understood kinship, and the nature of the worldview that the Nords have is that nothing is disposable. Whatever tools you have in your toolbox, you better make the most of it and find a way to make that your winning edge. And so when these trolls who can move fairly quickly and they can regenerate pretty well, they're very hardy, very tough units. They don't really want anything from you because they've never really had anything to greed after. Yeah, they're a wonderful weapon. This makes total sense to me. And while, most Nord tribes will not enjoy having trolls around. They kind of keep them isolated to the side. There is this mutual understanding of kinship and like a relationship there. But a bigger thing that stands out, one that I struggle in other wargames with, is that sometimes units and regiments don't feel special. Like you might have a unit that's, here's a version of this with an axe, and here's a version of this with a bow, and that's the only thing that's unique about them. But that's not so with trolls, because each one of them is a trauma scar on our collective species of Nords that walks among them. It reminds you, not only are your deities real, you're standing in the presence of people who have been around them personally, first-hand accounts, but also taken of their flesh, which is not a fun thing to think about, but it is what it is. And so someone in a chat pointed out, like, well, how come the Nords would believe this? Because, well, humans believed in Viking history at some point and moved away from it very, very quickly. It's like, I don't know, man. I can't imagine any religious movement dying out very quickly when you have literal representations and first-hand accounts, actual Einherjar. You can see burnt Yggdrasil still on like the plains off to the side. Like there's so much telling them that they're absolutely right. And that this particular regiment, the Trolls, have a backstory that ties uniquely into that story. It is its own evidence of their faith. And also a reminder, if you kind of take a step back out of the Nord perspective, they are a lasting consequence of another species trying to play God. They caused, with their experiments on this particular Einherjar, a deviation genetically in an entire subspecies to be born. Now, I'm actually kind of curious as to how the Spire would view a troll. Like, let's say they captured it and were like, what are you? And they kind of had to piece together what happened. That could be a really cool story. But when units and regiments have a way of like directly tapping in and making themselves a representation of the greater army's lore and their place in the universe and the things that haunt them and the things that make them special, that's the kind of stuff that I like. And so I was floored when I heard about this during my interview, and I just wanted to share it. So thank you all so much for hanging out and listening with me. If there is a bit of Conquest lore that you would like explored, please let me know, because I get lots of comments that are saying more Conquest, but there's nothing specific, and it's kind of hard to know exactly what everybody wants. So please tell me as specifically as you can, and I will get to it and give you credit for it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.